Hey friends, welcome to Jackson English Stories. I'm Anna and I'm so glad you're here. Let me tell you something that happened last week. I was in line at my favorite little coffee shop, this cozy place down the street where the lights are warm and the music always sounds like Sunday morning. In front of me was a woman, probably in her 40s, sweet energy, holding her phone like she was searching for courage. She turned around, looked at me and said, how do you say skim milk? She stumbled over the word, smiled shyly, and I smiled back. You're doing great, I said. She laughed and said, I just don't want to order whipped cream again. And just like that, we were talking. Two strangers connected by English and almond lattes. That's when I realized, sometimes it's not about the perfect grammar or the right accent. It's about listening. Listening to the words, the feeling behind the words, and the courage it takes just to try. So today's story is about those moments, the small ones, the real ones, the ones where listening can change everything. Have you ever been in a situation where someone was speaking English and you kinda understood the words, but you still felt lost? Maybe it was a coworker giving instructions way too fast, or a friend telling a story with 10 jokes you didn't get, or your partner whispering, we need to talk. Yeah, we've all been there. In this video, we'll dive into real-life moments where listening isn't just a language skill, it's a life skill. I'll share personal stories, small lessons, and simple tips to help you listen better, understand deeper, and speak more confidently. We'll take our time, we'll keep it real, and I promise, you'll hear something today that changes the way you learn English. So, are you ready? Let's begin. Okay, tell me if this sounds familiar. You're in a conversation. Someone's speaking English to you. You hear the words, but in your mind, it's like your brain hits the pause button. You stop listening and start translating, word by word, into your own language. And by the time you figure out what they probably meant, they've already moved on to the next sentence. And now you're lost. I get it. I've been there too, with Spanish. I once answered a waiter with "sí" when he clearly asked if I wanted no ice. But here's the truth. Most English learners aren't really listening. They're decoding. They're listening through their native language instead of in English. And guess what? That tiny habit, so automatic, so innocent, can slow you down more than you think. Let me paint a picture for you. A few months ago, I was helping my friend Lena practice for her visa interview. She's smart, funny, super expressive in her own language, but when we practiced English, she'd freeze. Not because she didn't know the words, but because she was translating every single question in her head before answering. I said, "What do you do for work?" And she paused. Her eyes went up like she was looking at an invisible dictionary on the ceiling. Then she whispered to herself in her language, then finally answered, I do teacher, children. It broke my heart, because I knew she could say it better. But she wasn't speaking English. She was building a sentence in her own language, then trying to export it. Now, imagine if you stopped doing that. Imagine what would happen if you trained your brain to think in English, little by little, instead of running back to translate. So, here's the question. How do you actually do that? Let's try something. A pattern interrupt. Right now, stop thinking. Close your eyes for 2 seconds. Now listen to this sentence. I'm just grabbing coffee. Want anything? Don't translate it. Just feel it, see it, hear it. Can you picture the scene in your mind? The cup, the casual voice, the smell of coffee, the person offering. That's listening. Real listening. You don't need to break it apart. You need to absorb it. And here's the beautiful part. When you stop translating, your listening gets faster. And when your listening gets faster, your speaking becomes smoother. And when that happens, you stop sounding like a student and start sounding like you, in English. So here's a little challenge. Today, try shadowing one English sentence, just one, without translating it. Say it out loud. Feel the rhythm. Repeat it as if it were your own. and trust your brain. It knows more than you think. All right, ready to go deeper? Because next, we're going to look at why real-life stories are your secret weapon to improving listening and writing. And trust me, the story I'm about to share might surprise you. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you remembered a grammar rule? Like, really remembered it? Past perfect, third conditional, passive voice, ring any bells? Now let me ask you something else. When was the last time you remembered a story? Maybe it was a funny thing your coworker said last week, or a stranger you met at the airport who told you something unexpected, or even a short video you saw online and it just stuck with you. That's the magic of stories. They stay, they echo, they move with you. And that's exactly why real stories are one of the most powerful tools for improving your English listening and your writing too. Let me show you what I mean. A while back, I had a student named Diego. Super smart, very technical. He worked in IT. But he told me, "Anna, I can understand English podcasts, but only when they're about computers." So I asked him, "What about other topics? Life, people, emotions?" He laughed. "Nope, I get lost. Too many feelings." So I gave him an assignment. I said, "Listen to this short story about a guy who moved to a new city. That's it. No tech, just life." He rolled his eyes, but he did it. Next week, he came back and said, "Okay, that story about the guy who was scared to move, that's literally me. I moved here for work. I didn't know anyone. I was scared too." And I said, "Exactly. Now tell me the story back." He didn't just remember the words. He remembered the emotions, the structure, the flow, and when he retold the story, it sounded natural. So why does this work? Because stories give context. Context gives meaning, and meaning makes everything easier to remember and reuse. When you listen to real stories, you hear how English works in the real world. You hear how people pause, how they emphasize things, how they laugh in the middle of a sentence or whisper something personal. It's not just English, it's human. And here's the best part. You don't have to understand every word. You just need to follow the feeling. Let the story carry you. Quick break. Pattern interrupt. Right now, close your eyes. Picture this. It's raining. You're sitting near a window. A friend calls and says, "You know what? I just quit my job today." Boom. What do you hear next? That curiosity, that pull to know more, that's what real listening feels like. So here's my question for you. What's one story that changed the way you think about English? Maybe it was a YouTube video. Maybe it was something your friend said. Maybe you haven't found that story yet. Well, good news. Because next I'm going to tell you a story about someone who thought they were bad at English, until one small moment changed everything. And no, it's not what you think. Let me take you to a moment. It's 8:47 a.m. You're standing in line at your neighborhood coffee shop, the one with the mismatched chairs and jazz playing too loud. You're still half asleep, thinking about your day, when suddenly the barista looks right at you and says, "Hey, what can I get started for you?" Fast, casual, friendly. And in that split second, your brain panics. Wait, what did she say? Get started for you? Is this an order, a question, a test? You smile, you freeze. You hear your heart beating louder than her voice, and you just say, yes. Now, why does this happen? It's not because you don't know the word coffee. It's not because your grammar is wrong. It's because you weren't listening to how English really sounds in the wild. That phrase, "What can I get started for you?" is something you'll hear in almost every coffee shop in America. But no one teaches it in textbooks. It's fast, it's friendly, and it's filled with connected speech. What can I get started for you? What do you get started for you? You see, that moment, right there, is when listening becomes real. It's not about perfect words. It's about recognizing the rhythm of English, the music, the flow. That's what makes you feel confident. Not memorizing scripts, but understanding how people actually talk. So here's the story I promised. One of my students, Haruto, had this exact moment. He had been studying English for 5 years. He knew grammar better than most native speakers. But one day, while ordering coffee, He froze. Not because he didn't know what he wanted, but because he didn't understand what the barista said. He came to class that week and said, "Anna, I think I don't speak English." I said, "No, Haruto. You don't listen to real English. Yet." So we made a plan. Every day for 1 week, he went to the same coffee shop. He didn't order right away. He listened. To the way people ordered, the phrases they used, the way the barista replied. And you know what happened? By the end of the week, he ordered his coffee like a local. No fear, no confusion. Just a smile and a confident, "Can I get a medium cappuccino with almond milk, please?" Now here's the lesson. If you want to speak English like real people, you have to listen like real people. Not to perfect, slow, scripted sentences, but to messy, beautiful, everyday speech, where people interrupt, where they mumble, where they talk too fast or too soft, or laugh halfway through a sentence. That's where your listening grows. That's where your confidence builds. So here's your tiny challenge today. Go somewhere, anywhere, and listen to how people actually speak. Not just the words, but the way they say them. Listen for tone, for pace, for those little phrases that don't show up in textbooks. And ask yourself, what are the sounds between the words? Because next, we're going to dive into the one thing that most learners never do, but the best learners do all the time. And it might just change the way you learn forever. Let me tell you a story. It was a Tuesday morning, raining, gray, the kind of morning where everything feels a little heavier. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and a podcast playing in the background. I wasn't really listening, until I heard a voice say something so simple, so familiar, that I repeated it out loud without even thinking. I didn't see that coming. 5 words, but I said them with the exact same tone, rhythm, and feeling as the speaker. And you know what? It felt right. That was the moment I realized some of the most powerful learning happens when you don't overthink it. Now I know what you might be thinking. "Anna, I can't speak like that. I need time. I need to translate. I need to think first." But what if I told you that thinking is the thing holding you back? Let's try something together. A little pattern interrupt. Right now, take a deep breath and just say this after me. "Hey, I was just about to call you." Again. "Hey, I was just about to call you." Don't analyze it. Don't break it down. Just say it like you're in the middle of a movie scene. That is shadowing. Shadowing is when you echo native speech right after you hear it, not by reading, not by memorizing, but by feeling the sound, the rhythm, the emotion. And the trick? You don't have to understand every single word. You just have to move with the language. Let me share a quick story about my friend Mina. She moved to Chicago and felt totally lost in conversations. People talked so fast, she said it felt like chasing a train with flip-flops. So we tried something simple. I gave her 3 minutes of audio, just a tiny conversation from a sitcom, and told her, "Don't study it, don't write it, just shadow it. Say what they say, exactly how they say it." At first it felt silly. She laughed at herself. But day by day, something shifted. Her mouth started moving faster. Her pronunciation got sharper. And one day, she called me and said, "You know what? I just joined a small talk at the bus stop, and I didn't even plan it. It just happened." That's what 3 minutes of shadowing can do. It bypasses the part of your brain that wants to control everything, and taps into the part that knows how to feel a language, like music, like dance, like real life. So let me ask you, when was the last time you spoke English without trying to be perfect? Because here's the thing. Fluency doesn't come from speaking perfectly. It comes from speaking often, with rhythm, with energy, and with confidence you didn't even know you had. And next, we're going to talk about one of the most powerful shifts you can make as a learner. The moment you stop trying to speak correctly and start focusing on speaking clearly. And it all starts with a story from the workplace. One that might sound very familiar. A few years ago, my friend Luis started a new job in an American company. His English was solid, but he was always so focused on speaking perfectly that he ended up not speaking much at all. One day during a team meeting, His boss asked him for an update, and instead of answering right away, Luis paused, trying to find the perfect sentence. And someone else jumped in, changed the topic, and the moment passed. Later, over coffee, he told me, I knew what to say, but I didn't want to mess it up. And I said, Luis, no one's waiting for Shakespeare. They just want to understand you. And that became his mindset shift. Stop chasing perfection. Start chasing clarity. See, in real conversations, at work, at home, anywhere, what people remember isn't whether your grammar was perfect. It's whether your message came through. So we practice something different, saying ideas simply, directly, and out loud, even with small mistakes. Instead of, I would like to provide a quick update regarding the previous project's budget constraints, he learned to say, here's what's going on with the budget. Clear, natural, confident. And suddenly, people listened. Here's the secret. The goal of speaking English isn't to impress, it's to connect. Ask yourself this. Do you hold back what you want to say because you're afraid it won't sound perfect? Because if so, what would happen if you chose clarity instead? You'd be surprised how powerful simple words can be. In fact, in the next story, I'll show you how one sentence, just one, completely changed how someone was treated in a meeting. It's a story about courage, misunderstanding, and what happens when you ask instead of pretend. And it starts with 4 simple words. Could you repeat that? A few months ago, one of my students, her name is Tanya, told me she always smiled and nodded during meetings at work, even when she didn't understand what was being said, and when I asked why, she said, because I don't want to look stupid, and I get it. So many learners feel that way, like asking someone to repeat something is a sign of weakness. But what if I told you that asking is actually one of the strongest communication skills you can have? In fact, in one meeting, Tanya finally tried it. Her manager said something with a heavy accent and a bunch of business jargon, and instead of nodding and moving on, she took a breath and said, Sorry, could you repeat that a little slower? And something amazing happened. The manager smiled and said, Of course, and then explained it in a clearer way. And after the meeting, 3 other coworkers came up to her and said, Thank you. I didn't get it either. That's the power of asking. When you speak up, you don't just help yourself, you help the room. Here's the thing. Native speakers ask for clarification all the time. Phrases like, say that again, or can you break that down for me, are totally normal. And honestly, they make you look engaged, not lost. So let's pause right now, pattern interrupt. What's one phrase you can memorize today that will help you next time you're confused in a conversation? Maybe, I just want to make sure I understood you right. Or, can you say that one more time, please? Choose one. Say it out loud. Say it again. Feel how natural it can be. Because if you train yourself to ask instead of pretend, your confidence grows faster than you think. And next, I want to tell you a story about one of the most silent skills in English, one that has nothing to do with your vocabulary, grammar, or accent, but everything to do with how you make people feel when they talk to you. And yes, it starts with your eyes, not your ears. A few days ago, I was watching 2 co-workers have a conversation in the break room. One was speaking, explaining something stressful, hands moving, voice tight, and the other was technically listening. But her eyes were on her phone the whole time, and even though she nodded politely, you could feel it. She wasn't really there. And it hit me. We don't just listen with our ears, we listen with our eyes. Think about it. When someone is talking to you and you're looking them in the eyes, leaning in just a little, reacting with your face, even if you don't say much, you're making them feel heard. That's emotional listening. That's connection. And the crazy part? You don't need perfect English to do it. Even if you only say, really, or wow, or no way, if your eyes are present, the message is, I care. And let's be real. How often do you check your phone while someone's talking? Or think about your next sentence before they finish theirs? Don't worry. We all do it. But here's your pattern interrupt. Next time you talk with someone, try this. Say nothing for 5 seconds longer than usual. Just listen, with your eyes, your posture, your face. You'll be shocked how much more people open up. This is a communication superpower that has nothing to do with advanced vocabulary, but everything to do with presence. So here's a question. What if the next big leap in your English journey wasn't learning more words, but learning how to make people feel seen? Because next, I'm going to tell you a story about a man who spoke very little English, but won everyone's heart at work just by being a great listener. And what he did was surprisingly simple. There was a guy named Sam who joined a company I once worked with. He had just moved from South Korea. His English was basic, and during meetings, he rarely said a word, just sat quietly at the table, listening. But what people noticed over time was that Sam always knew what was going on, remembered every task, and followed through better than anyone else on the team. One day, someone said, "You know who really gets things done?" The quiet guy, and we all laughed because it was true. Sam didn't speak much, but when he did, it mattered. You see, while others were busy trying to impress, interrupt, or sound smart, Sam was building something deeper: trust. And how did he do it? By listening, actively, consistently, respectfully. He didn't rush to speak. He absorbed. He took notes. And when someone asked, "Sam, what do you think?" he always responded with something clear, thoughtful, and calm. That's the secret. Trust isn't built by talking a lot. It's built by paying attention. Here's your pattern interrupt. When you're in a group conversation, instead of worrying about what to say, try focusing on what people really mean. Listen for tone, hesitation, emotion. And then, when you do speak, speak simply, but speak from that awareness. Because fluency is great, but clarity and presence, that's what people feel. So let me ask you, are you the one who speaks fast, or the one who listens deep? Because in the next part, I'll show you how just one thoughtful sentence, in the middle of a fast, messy conversation, can make you stand out more than any fancy word ever could. And the best part? You already have that sentence. Last month, one of my students, Raphael, told me he always felt invisible during meetings, not because he didn't have ideas, but because English still felt like this big, complicated mountain he had to climb before speaking. And one day, his manager asked, "Does anyone have a different perspective?" And Raphael, heart racing, simply said, "I'm not sure this is the best option, but here's what I see." And the room went quiet. Not because it was awkward, but because it was real, honest, thoughtful, and human. Sometimes it's not the fancy vocabulary that gets remembered. It's the tone, the intention, and the courage to say one clear, meaningful sentence. Speak less, mean more. That's the shift. In English and in life. So here's a question. What's your one sentence? The one that brings value, even when you're nervous. Maybe it's, "Can I offer another view?" Or, "What if we looked at it this way?" You don't need a paragraph. You just need presence. Here's your pattern interrupt. Instead of trying to say more in your next conversation, try saying less, but with 100% clarity and confidence. One sentence, one moment, one chance to be heard. And don't worry if your grammar isn't perfect, because clarity isn't about grammar, it's about connection. So now I want to take you into a different kind of moment, not in a meeting room, but in a kitchen. Yeah, we're going domestic in the next story, because what happens when someone misunderstands you at work is one thing. But what happens when it's someone you love? That's when listening and speaking with heart really gets tested. It started with a simple sentence. "Can you grab the salad?" But somehow, my student Carlos ended up pulling a frozen pizza out of the fridge, and his wife just stared at him like, "What part of salad sounds like pizza?" And that night, after the awkward silence and some cold lettuce, he told me, "Anna, I think I'm fine at work, but at home, my English just disappears." And I said, "You know why? Because at home, emotions are louder than grammar." We often think the hardest English is in business meetings or interviews, but the truth is, real listening gets tested around the people closest to us, because that's when we assume, interrupt, or hear only what we expect. Carlos thought he knew what his wife meant, but he didn't listen, and that tiny miscommunication turned into frustration. So here's the lesson. The more comfortable we are, the less carefully we listen, and that's exactly when we need to slow down. Pattern interrupt. Next time someone talks to you at home, repeat what you heard, even if it sounds obvious. You said salad, right? It might feel silly, but it shows you care, and honestly, it avoids a lot of awkward pizza moments. This isn't just about English, it's about listening like you mean it. So let me ask you, do you listen harder to strangers than to the people you love? And what would happen if you flipped that? Because next, we're going into a moment that really hits differently. It's not funny, and it's not about food. It's about hearing someone say, "I'm fine," and knowing deep down, they're not. And that's where listening becomes more than skill, it becomes love. The words were simple, "I'm fine," but the way Maria said them told a different story. Her voice was soft, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, and her husband, bless him, just nodded and went back to washing the dishes. And later she told me, "He always listens to what I say, but not to what I mean." And that moment hit me hard, because in English, and in every language, so much of what we really communicate happens between the words. How someone says something matters just as much as what they say. "I'm fine" can mean, "I'm tired," "I'm hurt," or "please ask me again," because I don't know how to open up. And here's the truth. Learning English isn't just about understanding words. It's about noticing tone, timing, hesitation, silence. Pattern interrupt. Think of someone in your life right now, someone who's been quieter than usual. When they said, "I'm okay," did you hear it or feel it? Maybe it's time to listen again, with more than just your ears. In real conversations, especially emotional ones, the best response isn't always a long speech. It's presence. A pause. A soft, "You sure?" or "You don't sound fine." That kind of listening builds trust in any language. And here's the big takeaway. The better you get at noticing emotion in English, the more natural and caring your communication becomes, even with limited vocabulary. So ask yourself, are you really hearing people, or just decoding words? Because next, I want to take you into a moment that's not about feelings, but about fast, high-pressure conversation. Like when someone's giving you directions, you blink for 2 seconds, and suddenly you're completely lost. And yep, I've been there too. So picture this. I'm visiting New York City, standing outside a coffee shop, and I ask a local, "Hey, how do I get to the subway?" And without skipping a beat, he goes, "Yeah, just head 2 blocks up, make a left after the deli, past the CVS, then down the stairs by the newsstand. Not the first one, the second." And by the time he said second, I was still stuck at deli. And that's the thing, real-life English, especially when it comes to directions, moves fast, and there's no pause button on a street corner. My student Ahmed told me he once nodded politely through directions to a dentist and ended up in a pet store. The problem wasn't vocabulary, it was real-time processing. In English, people often use landmarks, filler words, and quick gestures when giving directions, and if you're not used to the rhythm, it's easy to get lost, even when you hear every word. So here's a small but powerful pattern interrupt. When someone gives you directions, don't try to remember it all. Listen for the structure. Where does it start? What's the turning point? What's the final clue? Then repeat it back. So, 2 blocks, left after the deli, stairs by the second newsstand, right? That one step, confirming, can save you from a lot of wandering. And here's a little hack. When you're watching shows or YouTube videos with street scenes, pause and shadow those fast direction phrases out loud. Train your ears to catch speed. Because next, I want to take you into a whole new kind of speed. The speed of emotions, expectations, and pressure. Like when you're in a job interview and the questions come flying at you, and suddenly, your brain goes totally blank. But what if you had a strategy for that too? It was 9:01 a.m., and Javier was sitting in a chair that somehow felt smaller than it looked, staring at the interviewer across the table who smiled and said, "Tell me about a time you faced a challenge at work and how you handled it." And Javier blinked, once, twice, and nothing came out, not because he didn't have an answer, but because the question had come so fast, so packed with meaning, that his brain just froze. And afterward he told me, I knew exactly what I wanted to say, 20 seconds after the interview ended. Sound familiar? In high-pressure moments like interviews, our ability to listen, not just hear, but truly catch, The structure and emotion of a question is everything. And here's the hidden truth. Most people don't fail interviews because of poor English. They freeze because they're trying to listen, translate, think, and answer all at once under stress. So here's your pattern interrupt. Next time you hear a long question, zoom out and listen for the core request. Is the person asking for a story, a reason, a result? Break it into parts. For example, tell me about a challenge. Give a story. And how you handled it. Give the solution. That simple shift, listening for structure instead of every word, can give you back control. Try this. When watching interviews online, pause and ask yourself, what would I say here? Not perfectly, but clearly. Because the goal isn't to sound like a robot, it's to connect under pressure. And in the next story, we're going to shift scenes again, out of the office, out of formal settings, and into something much more personal. How everyday listening, even during simple things like cooking together, can strengthen not just your English, but your relationships. Last Sunday, my friend Elena invited me over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta, wine, and catching up. But as we cooked together, she asked, "Hey, can you pass me that thing?" while pointing at the garlic press, and I handed her a potato peeler, and she just laughed. "Anna, we really need to cook more often. My kitchen English is a mess." And that's when it hit me. Some of the best listening practice doesn't happen in a classroom or during a meeting. It happens while life is unfolding, in the middle of boiling water, chopped onions, and casual chat. Elena told me that when she started cooking with her roommate from Chicago, she didn't even know the word whisk. But she learned it fast, because she needed it. That's the key. When your brain connects language to movement, memory, and purpose, you don't just memorize, you live the language. So here's your pattern interrupt. Think of an everyday task you already do. Cooking, cleaning, walking your dog. What if you turned that moment into English time? Play a short podcast, shadow one line while you slice vegetables, or simply practice naming the objects in front of you. Pan, spatula, sink. It might feel silly, but it's powerful. Language sticks when it's attached to life. So let me ask you, what's one small routine in your day where you could sneak in just 2 minutes of real, relaxed listening? Because in the next part, we'll talk about how even those tiny moments, like helping your kids with homework, can become some of the most meaningful English learning you'll ever do. And what happened with Elena's garlic? Let's just say, dinner still turned out delicious. So my student Lila once told me, I didn't really use English until my daughter started bringing home math homework. And I laughed because I've heard that same sentence from so many parents. She said one night her daughter asked, "Mom, what's the difference between few and a few?" And instead of answering, Lila panicked, Googled for 10 minutes, and then just said, "Ask your teacher tomorrow." But you know what? That moment became the turning point, because the next day, Lila sat down with her daughter again, not as the expert, but as a learning partner, and they figured it out together. That's when it clicked. Helping someone else learn is one of the best ways to reinforce your own skills. When you explain something in English, even something simple, your brain works harder to organize, simplify, and clarify. And in doing that, you become the teacher and the student. So here's your pattern interrupt. Next time someone, your kid, your friend, your partner, asks you something in English, resist the urge to say, "I don't know." Instead, say, "Let's find out together." That one mindset shift opens the door to language growth in the most natural way. And if no one's asking you questions right now, make some up. How would you explain what borrow means to a child? Or describe the difference between by and until. It's not about being right. It's about thinking in English. So here's my question for you. Who could you practice teaching this week? Because in the next part, we'll explore how being around kids, yes, actual kids, might just be your greatest listening teacher, especially when they say things you think you understand, but don't. Yet. A few weeks ago, my neighbor's son, he's 5, walked up to me with a totally serious face and said, "When I grow up, I want to be a dinosaur or a sandwich." And I just blinked and thought, what did I just hear? But you know what? That's the beauty of talking to kids. There's no filter, no logic sometimes, just raw, unpredictable, wonderfully real language. And for English learners, listening to children can be one of the most surprising and powerful ways to grow your skills. Kids use simple words, but they say them fast, with emotion, and often in ways you don't expect. So you have to really pay attention. One of my students, Paolo, told me he improved his English just by spending time with his niece. She'd say things like, "I already did it," or "That's not fair." And he started picking up sentence patterns, rhythm, and pronunciation without even realizing it. So here's your pattern interrupt. Instead of focusing only on adult conversation, try this. Watch a few minutes of an English cartoon, or listen to how children explain things like feelings, rules, or even made-up stories. You'll hear natural grammar, real emotion, and vocabulary that actually sticks. Ask yourself, what would it sound like if you explained something in that same playful, simple way? Because sometimes, the fastest path to fluency isn't through textbooks. It's through the voice of a 6-year-old yelling, "Watch me, I'm flying!" And in the next part, we're going to explore something even deeper. How listening, not just to words, but to people's energy, can help you understand things they're not even saying out loud. And this one? It happens most often. With silence. A while back, I was sitting with my friend Claire at a cafe, and we were catching up after a long week. Lots of talking, lots of laughter. But then, at one point, I asked, "How are you really doing?" And she went quiet. Not for a second, but for maybe 10. And in that space, something shifted. And then she said softly, "Honestly? Not great." And that's when I realized that silence is not an absence of language. It's a part of it. In English, just like in any language, the pauses, the moments when someone hesitates, takes a breath, looks away, those are signals, and sometimes they say more than the words themselves. But here's the tricky part. Most English learners are trained to focus on what's said, not what's not said. So here's your pattern interrupt. Next time you're listening to someone, don't just follow their words, follow their energy. Are they rushing, slowing down, pausing at the end of a sentence like they're unsure? That's the space where real understanding lives. And if you're the one speaking, don't be afraid of silence. Sometimes the best way to connect is to let your words land and wait. That pause can make people feel heard. So let me ask you, when was the last time you let silence speak for you? Because in the next part, we're shifting gears into something a little louder. How music, rhythm, and even background sounds can shape the way you hear English, without you even noticing. And yes, I'm going to make you listen to a song differently than you ever have before. One evening I was driving home, and this old song came on the radio. James Taylor, soft guitar, steady rhythm. And even though I've heard that song 100 times, this time I noticed something different. The way he paused right before the chorus, like he was holding a breath, and I suddenly thought, that's what real English feels like. Music. Because let's be honest, language is music. The rise and fall, the rhythm, the beat between words. Feel them in your mouth. Because the more you tune into the sound of English, the more natural it becomes. Not just listening, but speaking too. And here's a thought. How would your English change if you stopped translating it and started feeling it, like music? Because in the next part, we're going from music to movement. How body language, gestures, and facial expressions can help you understand someone's message, even before they speak. A few months ago, I was at a birthday party, and across the room I saw this kid, maybe 7 or 8 years old, holding a slice of cake, staring at it like it was the most serious decision of his life. And before he even said a word, I could tell, he was debating whether to eat it or drop it on the floor for attention. And it reminded me that communication starts before we speak. Think about it. When someone walks into a room with shoulders down, arms crossed, eyes low, you feel their mood instantly, even if they don't say a thing. That's body language. And as English learners, we often focus so much on words, we forget that more than half of communication is nonverbal. My student Raya once said, "I didn't understand everything my boss said, but I understood her body." And that made all the difference. So here's your pattern interrupt. Next time you're watching a conversation, on TV, in real life, wherever, turn off the sound for just 10 seconds. Can you still guess the emotion, the intention? Body language helps you predict the tone, prepare your response, and fill in the blanks when words move too fast. In English, gestures, facial expressions, and posture all carry meaning, and learning to read that helps you listen better. So ask yourself, are you only listening to words, or are you watching the person too? Because in the next part, we're bringing it all together. I'm going to share a real story about someone who didn't have perfect grammar, didn't know every word, but used all these tools, tone, rhythm, silence, body language, to connect deeply with others. And it all started with a smile at a bus stop. It was a chilly Tuesday morning when my student Yusuf found himself standing at a crowded bus stop, just him and an older man in a blue jacket. And after a few awkward glances, the man looked over and said, "Cold one, huh?" And Yusuf, nervous but smiling, replied, "Yes, very much cold." And the man chuckled and said, "You must be new here." And they ended up talking about the weather, the city, and even their favorite breakfast spots. And later, Yusuf told me, "Anna, I didn't say anything fancy, but I felt connected." And that's exactly the point. It wasn't about perfect grammar or complex vocabulary. It was about presence. He listened to the tone, caught the humor, responded with a smile, and stayed open. That's everything we've talked about: rhythm, silence, body language, asking when you don't understand, noticing how people say things, not just what they say. Listening isn't just a language skill, it's a life skill. So here's your pattern interrupt. Think about your next conversation, no matter how small. How would it feel to just be present? Not perfect, just aware, open, curious? Ask yourself, can you let go of pressure and lean into connection? Because in the final part of this journey, we're going to zoom out. I'll walk you through the key mindset shifts that turn everyday listeners into confident English communicators. And I'll show you how to keep growing, even when you're not sure you're getting better. And trust me, if Yusuf can start with a bus stop smile, so can you. Let's take a breath, just for a second, and look back. Because if you've come this far, you already know. Becoming fluent in English isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about choosing clarity over pressure, curiosity over fear, and connection over performance. Whether it was Yusuf at the bus stop, Lila helping with homework, or you simply noticing a pause in a conversation, each moment was a small reminder. You're learning by living. And the mindset that makes you fluent? It's not, "I need to speak better." It's, "I'm already learning. Every time I show up, listen with intention, and try again." Pattern interrupt. What if you stopped asking, "How long until I'm fluent?" and started asking, "What did I notice today?" That tiny shift keeps you growing, even on the hard days. So here's your next challenge. Listen to the world around you like it's your classroom, your barista, your coworker, the stranger at the grocery store. Because fluency doesn't arrive like a certificate. It builds quietly, one moment of real connection at a time. You've got this. And hey, if this video gave you even one idea, one story, or one smile that stuck with you, then you're already farther along than you think. In our next episode, we'll go even deeper, not just into how we learn, but into the stories behind the voices you hear every day. Because there's still so much more to explore. And your English journey? It's just getting started. If today's video gave you even one small aha moment, something that made you smile, think, or breathe a little easier, then I hope you'll carry that feeling with you. Because learning English isn't a race or a test. It's a relationship. One that grows through presence, patience, and paying attention. And if you've made it all the way to this point, I just want to say thank you. Really. It means a lot that you chose to spend your time here with me. If there's a story you connected with, or even just a sentence that made you pause, tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if this kind of storytelling helps you feel less alone on your English journey, maybe hit that like button or subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because next time, we're diving into something that so many learners struggle with, but few ever talk about: how to stay confident when no one around you speaks English. Until then, keep listening, keep noticing, and keep showing up, because the world needs your voice, and it's getting stronger every day.